Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Joining us today is Hoops beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. As we know, it's been an up and down season for Michigan basketball. Wednesday night, the team won their third in a row against Nebraska at home. Juwan said he was happy with the early offensive balance, but he gave credit to the defensive play for generating most of that early scoring.
Well, it was great to see that offensively we made plays because, we was also playing unselfish. Our defense, of course, has generated a lot of our offense, starting with the second unit when you had Terrence Reed, Jace, Will, and Joy. And that crew's, I guess at that time it may have been Doug with that group. They were very active defensively. 41-17, and it was always because of the defense.
Even though Hunter Dickinson was not an offensive factor early in the game, Juwan said that was okay because, once again, when you come out and play aggressive D, good things happen.
Well, when you're playing good defensively, when you're active, getting deflections, limit your opponent to one-shot opportunities, doing your job by communicating on the defensive end, as well as when there are drives, guys stepping up, whether they're taking charges or protecting at the rim, that's when good things are going to happen.
Juwan said hard work and leadership have led to the current 3-game win streak.
Working hard, staying the course, working hard. And we've also gotten great leadership from people like Jace, and also getting leadership from Joey. And I think that has really been great to have those guys stepping up and having uncomfortable conversations and, whatever those conversations are, I don't pry into it, but I know it's having an impact on our team.
My guest today says it's too early to know if Michigan is peaking for the stretch run. We'll know more after Saturday's big matchup with Indiana at home. Joining us next is beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News, so stay with us. Joining us on our Game Day segment this week is Michigan beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. James, it's been a while, but it's great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Well, James, last night, Wednesday night's win against Nebraska, maybe not a thing of beauty, but at this point in the season, it was a much-needed win, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, obviously, we know the position that Michigan is in and the hole they kind of dug themselves in, and they kind of need any win they can get here if they want to kind of put themselves in the conversation to be on the NCAA tournament bubble. Like you said, I mean, it wasn't a great defensive effort by any means. Nebraska shot like 48% from the field, but I mean, when you shoot almost 60% from the field yourself and make 14 threes, I mean, you can kind of overcome whatever shortcomings you have on the defensive end.
Yeah, and it was a game of some really bizarre runs for both teams, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the surprising thing is when you think about it, that in that first half when Michigan went on that 30-5 run to kind of build that 24-point lead, I mean, Hunter Dickinson didn't score at all at that point. Like, he didn't even score his first bucket or even attempt his first shot until late in the first half. So I think more than anything, that was probably one of the more surprising things that happened in that game. Because, I mean, you think coming into the season, if someone would have said that, Michigan would have built a lead like that without Hunter ever scoring a basket. I don't think many people would have believed you, but I guess that just shows a sign of growth and guys kind of settling into their roles on this team.
Yeah, and that pushes the record up to 14-10 with that Nebraska win. 7 games left in the schedule. Indiana is up next at home this weekend, which is just another huge opportunity, isn't it?
I mean, if you just look at where Michigan was, I mean, going into the second half of the Big Ten schedule, those final 10 games, I mean, coming off that, that loss at Penn State was just disappointing. I mean, Michigan just essentially gave up in the second half in a game that they had to win. So, I mean, you look at like the final 10 games of the Big Ten season, you figure, I mean, obviously a lot of focus is on, the NCAA tournament and them making a push. So you figure, I mean, those final 10 games, Michigan probably has to go at least 7-3 to put themselves, on the bubble. And I mean, so far they've won, 3 of those games. They've won at Northwestern, they beat Ohio State, and then, like you just said, they beat Nebraska at home. And then, so you figure these last 7 games they have to win probably at least 4 of them. And I mean, you're not going to get many quad one opportunities at home. And I mean, Indiana, that's a huge opportunity for Michigan. So it's definitely a game they have to win because, I mean, if they don't, they let that opportunity slip away. I mean, you're talking about Michigan's going to have to go on the road and probably win, at least 2 of these road games they have left. And I mean, none of these places they have left to go are easy arenas to play in. I mean, you got to go to Wisconsin, got to go to Rutgers, got to go to Illinois, then got to go to Indiana. So, I mean, just emphasize the importance of picking up this win against Indiana, because if you don't, you got to go into one of these places that isn't easy to win.
Well, James, usually at this time of the year, when you get to the point where you have 7 games left, it sort of is what it is. We've seen the negatives from this team this year. They're pretty obvious, but there's still a lot of positives to look at, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem with this team all year has been its defense. I mean, that's no surprise. I mean, that's no secret to anyone that's watched this team all season long. But I mean, you can just kind of look, at this 3-game win streak that they've had. I mean, just kind of look at what the defensive efforts in the first 2 games against Northwestern and against Ohio State. I mean, they kind of held Northwestern below 40% shooting from the field, which is something they've only done a couple times in Big Ten play. And that's obviously a number that Juwan Howard cites. That's kind of the number that they aim for defensively, to kind of hold opponents 2 or under. And then the game against Ohio State, I mean, I think Ohio State shot like 40.7% or something like that. So it was around that mark too. So, I mean, those are 2 promising signs that, I mean, maybe they're buying in more on defense. They're, ratcheting up the intensity, doing a better job of locking into one-on-one matchups. Probably the highlight of that was, Ohio State game, they held Bryce Sensabaugh, who's a stud freshman. He had his worst shooting performance of the season. 4 for 14. So, I mean, yeah, if you want to take the positives, I'd like that 3-game win streak that they're on right now. I think, aside from the Nebraska one, but even then, I mean, you talk about the big run they had in the first half. I mean, Michigan was forcing a lot of turnovers, and they were turning those turnovers into points to kind of build that big lead. So that was like the one positive sign, that 8-minute stretch there where they went on that run. But I think that's probably one of the positives we've seen in this win streak. I mean, at least for those first 2 games, was kind of the defense. Seems like it's had a little bit of a turnaround here, which is something that obviously they hope to build on.
A lot of young guys logging minutes right now for Michigan, as we're seeing. Do you get the feeling this team might be peaking right now, or is it still, too early to tell?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still too early to tell. Obviously, Saturday's game against Indiana is probably going to be a bigger indicator of that. But obviously there's promising signs because, I mean, all season long, this team has struggled to, string together one good performance after another and kind of build after one promising performance after another. But we've seen that they've done that, during this 3-game win streak that they've had. And just stringing together wins is something this team has struggled to do all season long. I mean, they haven't won 3 straight since the start of the season. So, I mean, obviously there's, like you said, there's promising signs that this team is maybe hitting its stride and maybe but it's obviously trending in the right direction. But yeah, I think the one thing is this team has shown all season it's been like, it's been good enough to compete against good teams, but just not good enough to get over the hump. But I mean, we'll see if this team is really made progress and can kind of break that trend with Saturday's game against Indiana.
For a lot of us, this can be at times a really tough team to watch play. It seems like the chemistry is there at times during games, but they're wildly inconsistent, especially on the defensive end. With all of the young guys we're seeing playing this year, should we be surprised by that?
It's going to take time for guys to kind of settle into their roles. And I mean, obviously when you have as many new pieces as they have, I mean, they have 5 freshmen, you bring in a grad transfer guard in Jalen Llewellyn, you bring in another grad transfer in Joey Baker. Just look at the starting lineup. I mean, you have 4 guys that are playing new roles, essentially. I mean, aside from Hunter Dickinson, you have, Jet Howard coming in as a starter. Terrence Williams slid up into the starting lineup, playing a bigger role than he has throughout his career. Kobe Buffkin, moving into the starting lineup and playing a much bigger role. Then you obviously had, like I said, you had a new guy coming into the program, which we've seen that takes time for those guys to kind of find their footing in this program when they kind of make that jump up. And then obviously we know what happened with Jalen Llewellyn. I mean, he went down with that ACL tear, and then you're asking another guy, Doug McDaniel, to kind of step up and kind of get thrown into the fire and kind of take on a much larger role midway through the season. So, I mean, it's no surprise. I mean, it's just, I mean, you look throughout college basketball, I feel like if you look at like any team that kind of has a lot of freshmen kind of in the rotation, they're obviously going to have a lot of their ups and downs. And I mean, Michigan is certainly an example of that. But I mean, the one thing is that obviously it takes time for guys to settle in, kind of, buy into their roles, kind of settle into those roles. And I think once they do it, that's when you start to see teams click in. That might be what we're seeing with this Michigan team right now.
Well, let's talk about some of the individual play we've seen from these guys so far. Get your take, starting with Hunter Dickinson. And we know it all starts with him on that offensive end and defense. Your thoughts on his play overall so far this year, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hunter's been probably what you'd expect. I mean, probably some fans probably expected him to be putting up Zach Edey type numbers this season and just being a completely dominant force. But I mean, Hunter's been, throughout much of the season, he's been kind of steady, reliable, efficient, effective. I mean, it's like kind of the only thing you can ask him to do. I mean, obviously his numbers aren't quite. He hasn't really seen an increase in production. I mean, if you're comparing his numbers to last season, but I mean, I think he's kind of been, the guy that you thought he'd be. I mean, he's a guy. I mean, if he gets one-on-one matchups down low, he's going to punish teams, and if he's double team, he's going to, kind of find the open guy. And I think that's one thing he's kind of been doing a little bit better job of as of late. It seems like he's been making quicker decisions and kind of getting into his moves quicker, kind of recognizing when the second guy's going to come down and crash on him. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything to lift your nose at, I guess, about that, what Hunter has done. Like, I think, obviously I think fans might have hoped that he would have, maybe increased his production, maybe thought he could have been like, a guy who was averaging 20 and 10 per game this season. But I mean, yeah, I think he's kind of just still been producing and providing, I mean, just what you'd expect for him to do.
And I know since you've been covering the team, you've seen some great point guard play through the years. And of course, with Llewellyn going on, everything has gone on a young freshman. What do you think of Doug's play so far?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that Doug's been thrust into a tough spot. I mean, he goes from playing, 10, 12 minutes a game to where it's like now he's logging like, 30 plus, 35 minutes a game. So I mean, it's a tough deal for a young guy. I mean, obviously there's so much that first-year players are adjusting to at the college level. I mean, there's the speed, the terminology. You're playing with new teammates, especially at the point guard spot. You got to kind of know where guys like the ball. You kind of have to, know guys' tendencies, memorize all the plays. I mean, it's a lot that's thrown at these young guys, especially at the point guard spot. But I think the one thing, I mean, that kind of stands out with Doug since he's kind of taken over is it just seems like he's doing a better job of playing under control. It seemed like early on when he was coming off the bench, it seems like he was always trying to go like 100 miles an hour. You'd see him just kind of like, sprint down into the lane and just kind of throw up an off-balance shot or a wild shot up at the rim. And it seems like now he's doing a better job of kind of playing with pace and maybe, knowing when to change speeds, like coming off ball screens and, picking and choosing his spots, kind of doing a better job of utilizing that floater too instead of, just kind of running, like I said, 100 miles an hour at the rim. So like I said, obviously it's a tough spot, but I mean, the one thing, I mean, obviously no one likes to see injuries, and I mean, it's obviously hurt the team to see Jalen Llewellyn go down, but I mean, I guess the one silver lining is you think that, I mean, being thrust in this role is going to be huge for Doug and this team moving forward, because obviously Michigan hasn't had, same starting point guard throughout Juwan Howard's tenure. But I mean, now with Doug stepping up, it's like next year you're going to have the same guy at the point guard spot, which is kind of going to be a boon for this team, because like I said, it's something this program hasn't had since Juwan Howard's taken over.
And I guess we can't talk about individual play without bringing up Jet Howard. This kid just looks like he is getting better and better each game, doesn't he, James?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's kind of one of the top NBA prospects in the Big Ten for a reason. I mean, obviously the biggest thing is his ability to shoot. I mean, he put it on display, against Nebraska. I mean, just making 6 threes in that game. And yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, you think of what freshmen are able to do at this level. I feel like it's surprising just how quickly Jet has kind of established himself too. I mean, usually it takes some time for, freshmen to maybe, find themselves and kind of get comfortable at this level. But I mean, just look at, what was it, his first game of the season? I think he scored 22 points or something like that. And yeah. It's essentially been, Hunter and Jet is the two guys that Michigan's been relying on all season. I mean, those two have given Michigan a pretty potent inside-outside punch. And I mean, just Jet's, his ability to shoot, I mean, whether it's, just to create space off the dribble or just step back threes, catching it off a dribble handoff and just pulling it, just catch and shoot from wherever on the floor. Even these last 2 games, I mean, Ohio State, he hit some tough shots, like fall-away shots over, contested over a guy or over 2 guys. It's just, just what he's able to do on the offensive end is just above and beyond what you'd expect from a first-year guy. But, yeah, I mean, it's just been surprising at how quickly he's been able to make an impact and kind of, just assert himself as one of, like, the top, 3-point shooters and just shooters in the Big Ten.
Well, the other guy that keeps impressing me, and I'm hearing NBA guys say more and more, is Kobe Buffkin. And, we know Hunter's the main man, but Kobe is looking more to me like he is going to be a guts and glue type of a player in the future. And I don't know if that's just me, but do you see that with him, James?
Yeah, I mean, Kobe's been doing you look at these past 2 games, he's been kind of setting the standard for how this team should be playing. I mean, he's doing it all. I mean, he's scoring, he's facilitating. He's arguably the team's best defender. He's been locking down on that end. the one thing that maybe stands out as of late is just his ability to just go in and grab rebounds. I mean, that's been one of the weaknesses for Michigan all season long. I mean, we talked about their defense earlier, but I mean, they've been able to get stops, but the one problem is that they just haven't been able to finish these defensive possessions, just giving up the offensive rebounds. That's an area where Kobe's really picked it up as of late. I mean, if you just watch him, he's willing to kind of just go in there and grab the rebound, just battle for the loose balls. Yeah, he's definitely a guy that's maybe going to be drawing some NBA interest. I mean, if he kind of keeps it up at this level that he's kind of elevated his play at as of late. Like I said, he's just kind of been making an impact and he's picked it up with his all-around game. Like I said, with his scoring, assists, rebounding, defense, he's kind of just been doing it all for Michigan. Kind of, like I said, just setting the example for, how this team needs to play if they're going to make a postseason push.
Well, another guy I've always liked, and I keep waiting for him to take that next step, is Terrence Williams. He's just so talented, but he's a wild card guy in this mix, isn't he, James? I mean, because he can really, at times, really take over, can't he?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I was a big Terrence fan, especially late last season. Like, I was someone who thought that he maybe should have played more. But obviously, we saw the impact he made late in the season, like when they went into Ohio State and they won there without Hunter Dickinson to kind of stamp their ticket into the NCAA tournament. I mean, Terrence played a big part in that, I think, because he scored 18 points in that game. And then, we remember what he did, in the NCAA tournament when over Tennessee that got them into the Sweet 16 when he had those two big offensive tip-ins. So he's always been a guy, like, assistant coach Phil Martelli always says this whenever he talks about Terrence, but he's a guy that impacts winning. And I think the thing is, like, when he moved into the starting lineup, I think a lot of people just expected him to kind of pick up his production, and obviously that's just something that he hasn't been able to do. And I mean, the one thing that kind of stands out is, like, late last season, his 3-point shot was really, really a weapon for this team. But I mean, as we've seen this season, it's kind of like, that was kind of one of the things to watch is, like, when his volume goes up, is he going to be able to, keep that percentage at a high clip like he did last season? But I mean, he's kind of shown that he hasn't really been able to do that. I mean, he's shooting 27% from three on the season so far. But yeah, like you said, he's kind of just a wild card. You kind of don't know what you're going to get from him, but he just hasn't really been, that consistent scorer that's been, scoring, 10 points for this team. So yeah, it just seems like he's maybe just a better suited guy that's maybe just a sixth man off the bench, so to speak. But yeah, I just don't think that he has really taken that next step that many had thought he was going to. But I mean, obviously, like we saw in the game against Nebraska, he's still an asset to this team, and even the game against Ohio State when the Buckeyes were kind of making those pushes in the second half to kind of cut it to one possession, to cut it to 3 points. I mean, Terrence was one of those guys that came up, stepped up, and I think he hit a tough, I think it was like a baseline jumper, like late in the shot clock that kind of made it a 5-point game. So I mean, he still obviously has that knack to kind of make tough shots when they need it. But yeah, I don't know what it is, but he just hasn't really kind of taken that step that many had hoped and expected that he would this season.
Well, Juwan's also getting a lot of bodies into the games. What are your thoughts on the Michigan bench play we're seeing? Is it a concern right now, the depth and what we're getting in the way of production, or is it maybe better than we think?
No, I think the bench has been cause for concern at certain points this season. But I think obviously, like we talked about earlier, I mean, you have young guys that are kind of stepping in, playing roles. Like, I mean, you have Terrence Reed that's kind of working his way, and kind of finding his, himself, in the lineup at times. Same thing with Will Cheddar. I mean, obviously he redshirted last season, so he's the guy that's playing, minutes in a role for the first time. But I feel like they've been picking up their play as of late. I mean, the one guy I would highlight is Joey Baker. I mean, just look at what he's kind of done these last 3 games. I mean, he's hit 2 or 3 threes during this win streak for Michigan. And I mean, when you have a guy that can come off the bench and kind of give you that type of production and, just kind of help space the floor for Hunter, I mean, that's huge. But I mean, obviously, like I said, I mean, throughout this entire season, Michigan has had its ups and downs. And I mean, the bench has kind of been the same way. They've kind of ridden that same type of roller coaster. I don't think they've produced as much as you would like and would hope. I mean, obviously, just against the Nebraska game, I mean, the second unit was the one that kind of really helped blow that game open when they went on that huge run. I mean, Jace Howard hit a corner 3. Then you had, like, Terrence Reed was out there. He kind of deflected a pass and stole and scored on a fast break on his own. And then, like I said, you had Joey Baker, scored 3 buckets in like a minute stretch or whatever that kind of capped that spurt. So, I mean, if you can kind of bottle up that type of performance from the bench moving forward, like they had in the Nebraska game, I think it's going to be a huge boost and would bode very well for the team moving forward.
Well, final question before we let you get away, James. We're well into the Juwan Howard era of Michigan basketball. And even though it's been an up and down season so far, do you think when you look big picture, he still has this program on a good trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's. I think there's been a lot of talk. Well, I would say amongst fans. I mean, obviously they're looking at the overall job that Juwan has done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you kind of look at his first season. Obviously, it's kind of hard when a guy steps in and he just kind of takes over a team. Kind of pin that season on him. I mean, obviously that was what I think they went 19-10 that year, and 10-10 in Big Ten play. And then obviously, I mean, you can look at what they've done since his second season. Obviously, we know they won the Big Ten regular season title. Fell a shot short of reaching the Final Four. But I mean, obviously the following two seasons seems like the team has, taken steps back. Obviously, last season was another roller coaster ride up and down. They kind of backed into the NCAA tournament, made the Sweet 16, and then this season kind of been the same thing. But I mean, I think the thing is, I think the problem is a lot of people are comparing him to John Beilein, which is, I mean, understandable. I get it, but I think you got to separate the two. I mean, obviously, and the one thing that, Juwan kind of needs. I mean, you got to give Juwan Howard kind of time to kind of fix these things. I mean, obviously, we know he took over a program that was thriving. I mean, look, Beilein's last two seasons, what I think they won was back-to-back 31 seasons or something like that. I mean, it was a team that had a remarkable stretch of success that not a lot of programs can match in the country. So, I mean, I do get, the fans' frustrations about kind of the team's record. I mean, I think since that second season, they've kind of been, I guess you could say just mediocre overall. Mm-hmm. But I mean, obviously you got to remember that Juwan was a guy that came in with no, college coaching experience. And I mean, Beilein was a guy that had 3 decades of experience. And when he kind of turned this program around, like I said, obviously completely different situations that, from when Beilein took over to when Juwan Howard took over. But I mean, I think you got to give Juwan Howard maybe time to kind of fix things and turn things around on his own. Because like I said, I get, fans are frustrated. They think that, I mean, obviously John Beilein had, like I said, he kind of set a high bar for this team. I mean, where he kind of left this program, like I said, I mean, they're consistently 25 plus win seasons or what have you. I mean, time will tell, like with anything. But I mean, I think you just have to give Juwan time, like I said, to kind of figure things out and give him the chance and the opportunity to kind of fix this thing and kind of turn things around. Because I mean, like, who knows what's going to happen the rest of the season. I mean, then Michigan could go on a run, and then I mean, obviously everyone would forget what happened, the first few months of the season. Because I mean, one thing too is, like, you remember Beilein's final few years. I mean, Michigan really wasn't. I mean, there was maybe one year where they were in the Big Ten race, but I mean, the one thing with Beilein's team was they always hit their stride at the right time, and they always took off in the postseason. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Like I said, with this season, but I mean, I think you just gotta kind of be patient. I'm not gonna sit here and say how much time you need to give Juwan before maybe his seat starts to heat up, but I mean, it's also kind of hard to kind of dismiss, like I said, what he has done. I mean, he has won a Big Ten regular season title. He took the team to an Elite Eight. I mean, he has. I mean, for all the struggles the team had last season, he did manage to take them to the Sweet 16. So it also just sparks that debate over, what matters more. I mean, what defines a team's success more in a season? Is it the postseason? Is it the Big Ten? Were they fair in the Big Ten? I mean, that's all part of the, I guess the debate. But I mean, as of right now, I mean, Juwan has Michigan tied for second place in the Big Ten. I mean, obviously the standings are jumbled and everyone's chasing Purdue, but I mean, he has him in position to get a bye in the Big Ten tournament. Obviously, they still got work to do, but I mean, who knows if he can get this team in position to kind of make the postseason. Then, I mean, when that happens, like we've seen last season, it all turns into matchups and how you and anything can happen come March Madness.
Oh, absolutely. And again, as we record this morning, we're 14-10 in the season 7. Huge opportunities coming up. So plenty of basketball yet to be played and write this season's story. With us on our game day segment today has been Michigan beat writer James Hawkins from the Detroit News. James, as always, it's a pleasure having you on the show, and we thank you for being so generous with your time and look forward to that next visit.
All right, no problem. Thanks for having me. Take care, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, number 12 ranked Michigan women's basketball, 19-5 overall, 9-4 in the Big Ten, returns to Chrysler Center after a week off, hosting Nebraska on Sunday afternoon at 1 p.m. It is Michigan's pink game, with the team honoring a group of breast cancer survivors who will announce the starting lineup. The matchups will be streamed live on Big Ten Plus. Again, Juwan Howard and his team will play Indiana at Chrysler on Saturday. Tip time is 6 p.m. In a dead heat in the Big Ten standings, number 5 ranked hockey looks to create some space between its in-state rival, number 15 Michigan State, and itself when the teams meet this weekend. They will meet in East Lansing on Friday night at 7 p.m. on Bally Sports Detroit Plus to open the series at Munn Ice Arena. On Saturday night, the Iron D is on the line in the annual Duel in the D at Little Caesars Arena. Game time is set for 8 p.m. and you can watch it on ESPNU. Softball will open its 46th season of intercollegiate competition and its first under head coach Bonnie Thole with 5 games in the Sunshine State this weekend. The Wolverines will open with head-to-head matchups at South Florida at 6 p.m. on Thursday, which is today, at USF Softball Stadium in Tampa. Michigan will then travel to Leesburg for the Spring Games Tournament, facing Colgate at 1:30 p.m. on Friday, Western Kentucky in an 11 a.m. doubleheader on Saturday, and Portland State at 9 a.m. on Sunday. Baseball will get their season underway next week. That does it for another show. Make sure you tell your family and friends about us, and tune in again next week. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!